The confession was out. The truth had been revealed. Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney had admitted that their romance was fake, that their chemistry was performed, that their entire relationship narrative had been a calculated marketing strategy designed to sell movie tickets. But if they thought that confession would be the end of the story, if they thought they could simply move on from the deception and enjoy their success without consequences, they were wrong. Because the truth has a way of catching up with you, and the people you hurt in pursuit of your dreams have a way of making their voices heard, and the relationships you sacrifice for professional advancement have a way of staying sacrificed. This is the story of what happened after the confession. This is the story of the real consequences of Glenn and Sydney's deception. This is the story of how their professional success came at a personal cost that they're still paying today. But to understand the full scope of those consequences, we need to look at where everyone stands now, more than a year after the truth came out. We need to examine how the revelation of their deception affected their careers, their relationships, and their reputations. We need to understand that while Glenn and Sydney achieved their professional goals, the human cost of that achievement continues to reverberate through their lives. Let's start with Glenn Powell, because in many ways he got exactly what he wanted from the anyone but you deception. His career has absolutely skyrocketed since the movie's success. He's gone from being a supporting actor to being a leading man. He's starring in major blockbusters like Twisters. He's getting magazine covers and leading man roles and all the trappings of Hollywood stardom. From a professional standpoint, Glenn's strategy worked perfectly. The fake romance rumors generated massive publicity for anyone but you. The movie's success established him as a bankable star. The chemistry he performed with Sydney convinced audiences that he could carry a romantic comedy. Everything he wanted professionally, he achieved. But the personal cost of that success has been enormous. Glenn's relationship with Gigi, the woman who supported him through years of struggle, is over. 3 years of love, support, and shared dreams were sacrificed for a marketing campaign. The woman who believed in him when he was nobody, who stood by him through the lean years, who was planning a future with him, was discarded the moment she became inconvenient to his career trajectory. And Glenn doesn't seem to have learned anything from that loss. In fact, his comments to Variety after the success of Anyone But You suggest that he's eager to repeat the experience. "Please send us all the scripts you got," he said about working with Sydney again. "You know we're here for it." Glenn is actively looking for opportunities to work with Sydney again, to recreate the chemistry that made them both stars, to potentially repeat the marketing strategy that worked so well the first time. He's not thinking about the human cost of that strategy. He's not considering the people who might be hurt by another round of fake romance rumors. He's thinking about box office numbers and career advancement and professional success. And that reveals something troubling about Glenn's character. The fact that he's eager to work with Sydney again, knowing what their collaboration cost him personally, suggests that he values professional success more than personal relationships. It suggests that he's willing to sacrifice love for fame, authenticity for advancement, real connection for manufactured chemistry. But Glenn's eagerness to repeat the experience also reveals something else. He doesn't seem to understand that the strategy might not work as well the second time around. Because now everyone knows that Glenn and Sydney are capable of faking a romance for marketing purposes. Now everyone knows that their chemistry might be performed rather than genuine. Now everyone knows that their relationship rumors might be calculated rather than organic. The audience that fell for their deception once might not be so easily manipulated again. Meanwhile, Sydney Sweeney's life has been even more dramatically affected by the consequences of their deception. While Glenn's personal life was damaged but his career flourished, Sydney has experienced upheaval in both areas. Professionally, Sydney has continued to be successful. She's got new seasons of Euphoria in development, she's starring in major film projects, she's established herself as one of the most sought-after young actresses in Hollywood. The success of Anyone But You certainly didn't hurt her career prospects. But personally, Sydney's life has been turned upside down. In May 2025, more than a year after the confession about the fake romance, Sydney finally confirmed what many had suspected. Her engagement to Jonathan Deino was over. I'm learning a lot about myself, spending more time with my friends, and I'm loving it, Sydney told The Times when asked about her relationship status. But that upbeat assessment masks the reality of what happened to her 7-year relationship with Jonathan. According to sources close to the situation, Sydney and Jonathan's relationship had been rocky for a long time after the Anyone But You controversy. The strain of the fake romance rumors, the public speculation about Sydney's fidelity, the knowledge that Sydney had actively participated in a deception that made Jonathan look like a fool, had taken its toll on their relationship. What did make her overwhelmed, though, was her relationship and her wedding, a source told People magazine. She didn't feel right about it. Sydney, who had been engaged to Jonathan since February 2022, who had been planning a wedding, who had been building a life with someone she claimed to love, ultimately couldn't go through with it. The woman who had always insisted on keeping her personal life private, who had chosen a partner outside the entertainment industry specifically to avoid complications, had allowed her professional ambitions to destroy the very relationship she had worked so hard to protect. And the most tragic part of Sydney's situation is that she seems to have convinced herself that this outcome is what she wanted. She's exactly where she wants to be, the source continued. She's not ready to settle down. They split because she just wants to focus on her career right now. But is that really what Sydney wanted? Or is that what she's telling herself to justify the choices she made? Because the Sydney Sweeney who got engaged to Jonathan Deino in 2022 seemed very ready to settle down. The Sydney Sweeney who talked about wanting a partner who would let her shine without feeling threatened seemed very committed to building a life outside the entertainment industry spotlight. The Sydney Sweeney who participated in a fake romance for marketing purposes, who was on every call and in text group chats planning the deception, who prioritized her career over her relationship, is a different person than the one who fell in love with Jonathan Deino. And that transformation reveals the true cost of Sydney's choices. She didn't just lose her fiancé, she lost herself. She became someone who could sacrifice love for success, who could prioritize professional advancement over personal integrity, who could participate in a deception that hurt the person she claimed to love most. The sources comment that Sydney and Jonathan didn't split because there is no love is particularly heartbreaking. They still loved each other. They still cared about each other. But love wasn't enough to overcome the damage that had been done by Sydney's choices during the Anyone But You marketing campaign. Jonathan Deino, the businessman from Chicago who had proposed to Sydney and was planning a wedding, had to watch his fiancée become the subject of affair rumors that she did nothing to dispel. He had to endure months of speculation about whether the woman he loved was cheating on him with her co-star. He had to live with the knowledge that Sydney was actively participating in a deception that made him look like a fool. And even after the truth came out, even after Sydney and Glenn confessed that their romance was fake, the damage to Jonathan's relationship with Sydney was irreversible. Because the issue wasn't whether Sydney had actually cheated. The issue was that she had been willing to let people think she had cheated for the sake of her career. The issue was that she had prioritized her professional success over his feelings, over their relationship, over their future together. And Jonathan, who had supported Sydney through her rise to fame, who had been there through the success of Euphoria and the challenges of sudden stardom, who had proposed to her and was planning to spend his life with her, ultimately couldn't accept being treated as expendable. The fact that Sydney and Jonathan have been spotted together occasionally since their split, that they're still figuring things out according to sources, makes their situation even more tragic, because it suggests that they still care about each other, that they still have feelings for each other, but that the trust that's essential to any relationship has been irreparably damaged. This wasn't just a relationship, a source told People. This was two people living together and planning a future. They still have things to figure out, But some things can't be figured out. Some damage can't be undone. Some trust, once broken, can't be repaired. And then there's Gigi Paris, the woman who was fed to the dogs for the sake of Glenn's career, who has finally found her voice and is telling her story. Gigi's decision to speak out on the Too Much podcast wasn't just about getting closure or setting the record straight. It was about exposing the human cost of Hollywood's obsession with manufactured drama. Gigi's story has resonated with people because it reveals something that the entertainment industry often tries to hide. That behind every successful PR campaign, behind every viral marketing strategy, behind every carefully orchestrated romance rumor, there are real people whose lives are being affected. Gigi was collateral damage in Glenn and Sydney's pursuit of success. She was sacrificed for a lie. She was discarded for a performance. And her willingness to finally speak out about that experience has given a voice to everyone who has ever been hurt by Hollywood's manipulation and deception. But Gigi's story also reveals something else, that the people who are hurt by these strategies don't just disappear. They don't just fade into the background and accept their fate. They remember, they heal, and sometimes they speak out. And when they do speak out, they remind us that success built on deception comes with a cost. They remind us that professional achievement gained through manipulation is hollow. They remind us that the people we hurt in pursuit of our dreams don't just disappear. The entertainment industry has largely moved on from the anyone but you controversy. The movie is considered a success story, a case study in effective marketing, an example of how to revitalize a genre. Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney are both bigger stars than they were before. The strategy worked from a professional standpoint. But the human cost of that strategy continues to reverberate. Gigi Paris is still dealing with the emotional aftermath of being discarded. Jonathan Deino is still processing the betrayal of being made to look like a fool. Sydney Sweeney is still trying to figure out who she is after sacrificing her most important relationship for her career. And Glenn Powell is still looking for his next opportunity to work with Sydney, still eager to recreate the chemistry that made them both stars, still apparently unaware of or unconcerned about the human cost of their success. The most troubling aspect of this entire saga is that it seems to have taught the wrong lessons to everyone involved. Instead of learning that success built on deception is hollow, Glenn and Sydney seem to have learned that deception is an effective marketing tool. Instead of learning that real relationships are more valuable than professional advancement, they seem to have learned that professional advancement justifies any personal cost. And the entertainment industry, rather than being horrified by the manipulation and deception, seems to be looking for ways to replicate their success. But the real lesson of the anyone but you controversy isn't about marketing strategies or box office success or career advancement. The real lesson is about the human cost of ambition, the price of success, and the value of authenticity. Gigi Paris, Jonathan Deino, and even Sydney Sweeney herself paid a real price for Glenn and Sydney's professional success. Real relationships were destroyed, real trust was broken, real people were hurt. And no amount of box office success, no amount of career advancement, no amount of professional achievement can justify that cost. Because at the end of the day, when the cameras stop rolling and the publicity campaigns end and the box office numbers are forgotten, what we're left with is the relationships we've built and the people we've loved and the trust we've earned. Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney achieved their professional goals through the anyone but you deception. But they lost something much more valuable in the process, their integrity, their authenticity, and the trust of the people who loved them most. And that's a price that no amount of success can ever repay.